Now available in paperback and e-readers, The Temptation of John Haynes. Given to temptation, pick up this action-packed African-American paranormal romance. Get The Temptation of John Haynes in paperback and e-readers today. One of my viewers wanted to know the chronological order to read all of the books in the SJS Direct universe. Now, I don't really set a chronological order for reading the books in the SJS Direct universe, and if readers choose to go out here and pick up stories, they can choose any point to read them, because I try to write and structure every story in the SJS Direct universe to have its own beginning, middle, and end, and be its own entry point. This is an approach to storytelling I learned from Marvel Comics editor Jim Shooter when he talked about entry points in a blog he wrote back in, I think, about 2011 or 2012, and he stated that every story should be an entry point, so I try to make every story an entry point for new readers. So there are some out here who want to read the SJS Direct universe in a chronological order similar to that of the Marvel Cinematic Universe movies, so I'm going to break down that chronological order so that readers who want to read it in that fashion can pick up all of the books in the SJS Direct universe and follow the entire story from a panoramic perspective and see the bigger picture as related to the SJS Direct universe. Now, the first book in the SJS Direct universe is The Temptation of John Haynes, and The Temptation of John Haynes lays the foundation for the world of the SJS Direct universe, just like Iron Man in 2008 laid the foundation for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Now, your John Haynes is introduced in The Temptation of John Haynes as the primary protagonist, and Lucifer is introduced as the primary antagonist. And your ESTEEM is introduced as the love interest and girlfriend of John Haynes, and this book also opens the door for Isis to step into the SJS Direct universe. Now, after The Temptation of John Haynes, we get the short story ESTEEM, No Good Deed, and this story is one that starts to establish ESTEEM as a heroine, and in this short story, your ESTEEM takes on some hood rats as she's going shopping down on 5th Avenue. Now, there are two versions of ESTEEM, No Good Deed. There's a prose version, but there's a great comic version done by Bill Walko, and I definitely recommend you go out here and check out the comic version of ESTEEM, No Good Deed, because it's a fun comic and shows you what the SJS Direct universe could be if I could go out here and make comics on the regular. Now, after your ESTEEM is introduced as a heroine, she gets the first story in her character transformation arc, and that story is Deadly Delilah. Now, this story, Deadly Delilah, introduces ESTEEM's archenemy, Delilah, and it starts the feud between ESTEEM and Delilah, and also shows that Lucifer still is trying to get ESTEEM back to join his legion again. Now, after ESTEEM Deadly Delilah comes Isis Amari's Revenge, and Isis Amari's Revenge is the story that introduces Isis to the SJS Direct universe and makes her a part of the world of the SJS Direct universe. Now, Amari's Revenge starts with a flashback sequence with Isis's rival Amari, who is the princess of Nubia, and this story is all about Amari coming back to life in modern times, looking to get even with Isis, who is looking to move her life forward and start her life in the 21st century. Now, in this story, you also have Isis running into ESTEEM, and as Isis runs into ESTEEM, we start building up another storyline, which is the eventual Isis meeting John Haynes, because as Isis and ESTEEM start to meet and start to reconcile, and they find out that they are sisters, ESTEEM starts to talk about John Haynes, and that starts building up the storyline for Isis as related to the future, as related to the SJS Direct Universe, and a major story point. Now, after Isis Amari's revenge comes Isis the Ultimate Fight, and Isis the Ultimate Fight starts Isis making plans for her career, and in that story we're introduced to Doc Flowers, who was a part of the Theta sorority that Isis founded. And as the story goes on, we start to learn more about Isis's plans to go back to being a teacher, a job that she had in the past. And as she's working towards that goal, we start to learn why Isis is a hero in this story, where she takes on the Greek goddess Nemesis, who challenges her to a fight in the Octagon. Now, this is a action-packed story that really starts to lay the foundation for Isis's world, and starts to lay the foundation for her being the goddess next door, the goddess who is a girl next door, who is a friend to everyone. Now, after Isis the Ultimate Fight, we get more world building with ESTEEM in the story Demons Anonymous, and Demons Anonymous is an essential story to the SJS Direct Universe, because this one introduces the character of Claudius, who is a part of an organization called Demons Anonymous, a group of demons who are trying to give their life to Christ. And this is all part of ESTEEM's character transformation arc, where she's trying to have a relationship with God after walking away from Lucifer's Legion. So Demons Anonymous is a major story because Claudius is the former boyfriend of ESTEEM's archenemy, Delilah, and this builds up the feud between ESTEEM and Delilah, who is ESTEEM's, again, major archenemy for the ESTEEM series' first story arc. Now, as this is going on, we then move to Isis, the Beauty Myth, another major story in the foundation of the SJS Direct Universe. Now, this story is essential to the SJS Direct Universe because it continues building up the whole meeting of ESTEEM with John, and it also builds up the story because this is the first appearance of Rahima Sanders, who later goes on to become a major villain in the SJS Direct Universe. So the Beauty Myth is a major story that, if you are wanting to read it in chronological order, this is an essential story because this sets the feud between Isis and Rahima, and it sets up the future storylines in the SJS Direct Universe. Now, after the Beauty Myth comes Isis, my sister, my frenemy, and in this story, Isis has to deal with her feelings about ESTEEM that have been building since Amari's revenge and the Beauty Myth, and she has to deal with her feelings about whether she can trust ESTEEM, who was a major villain in previous stories like the first Isis and the Politics of Hell. So as Isis has to deal with her feelings about ESTEEM, your ESTEEM has another run-in with Delilah, and it's this run-in with Delilah that leads to Isis eventually going out here and her relationship with ESTEEM changing. So that's a major story that everybody needs to read as related to the SJS Direct Universe. And then after that comes Fairy Tale, where I introduce Morgan Le Fay in a hilarious story where ESTEEM is out here being the princess who is trying to save John, who has been put to sleep by Morgan Le Fay. Now, after that, that's what happens in Fairy Tale, and as Fairy Tale is going on, we have Isis in All About the Goddess, where she's teaming up with former child star Marilyn Marie, who's dealing with a campus stalker. Now, this is another key story because your Isis is following the philosophies that ESTEEM taught her in My Sister, My Frenemy, where she tells Isis that she needs to go where she's needed. And it's in this story that Isis starts to really start to lay the foundation for becoming the goddess next door, and she starts to think more about going where she's needed rather than having a career as a teacher as a way to helping people. So this is a story that is core to redefining Isis's character from being a teacher to becoming a student and learning more about the world in the 21st century. So this is a key story to Isis's character transformation arc, and it's one you definitely do not want to miss. So that's a major story as related to Isis's character, and it also concludes Isis's first story arc. So that's another one you don't want to miss. And after that comes ESTEEM, the Beast from the Bowels. And this is another story that you want to read because it leads into future stories as ESTEEM has her big fight with Umbutra, the Beast from the Bowels, and Delilah is trying to deal with her lack of confidence after getting beat in Isis, My Sister, and My Frenemy. Now, after the Beast from the Bowels comes Isis, Wrath of the Cyber Goddess, and in Wrath of the Cyber Goddess, Isis finally meets JOHN HAYNES, and this leads to major conflicts later on. And this is again an essential story because this story starts the second story arc in the Isis series, and it also opens the door for Isis meeting JOHN HAYNES, and has it where Isis, JOHN HAYNES, and ESTEEM are working together to take down the Cyber Goddess. Now, after Isis, Wrath of the Cyber Goddess, we have Isis, Power of the Princess, and Isis, Power of the Princess is where the Nemesis arc has its turning point in its second act, as Isis manages to help Nemesis realize that she needs help, and starts to realize that she can go out here and help people as a goddess in this story. Now, after this comes the second big crossover in the SJS Direct Universe, and that is Isis, Night of the Vampires. And this is a key story in the SJS Direct Universe because this is the first appearance of Lilith Graves, who is a major player later on in the SJS Direct Universe. And this story introduces the vampires to the SJS Direct Universe that some have read about in previous books like Eternal Night. Now, as this is going on, we have a crossover with ESTEEM Undercover, where ESTEEM is learning more about Morris Phillips' business, and that's another story that's essential to the SJS Direct Universe as related to the big crossover between Isis and ESTEEM books, and really lays more of a foundation for the continuity. Now, after this comes Isis, the Bride of Dracula, and Isis, Bride of Dracula is the follow-up to Night of the Vampires, and this is the book that most people know JOHN HAYNES from if they haven't read The Temptation of JOHN HAYNES, and this is considered to be, but for many readers, an essential book to the SJS Direct Universe because it was a major entry point for new readers. Now, after Isis, Bride of Dracula came the big SJS Direct Universe event, which was The Man Who Rules the World. Now, The Man Who Rules the World was the sequel to The Temptation of JOHN HAYNES, and in this story, JOHN HAYNES took on God, Cassius, who Lucifer was sending out to take over the world if he killed JOHN HAYNES. So this is another core book to the SJS Direct Universe because this was the big major event for all of the characters after Isis, Wrath of the Cyber Goddess, and this was a major event, and this is one you definitely do need to pick up if you want to see the bigger picture of the SJS Direct Universe. Now, after The Man Who Rules the World came The Witches of Eastland, and this is a story that lays a foundation for the Eastland Academy, and this Eastland Academy is going to be featured in future stories because these witches are not finished with ESTEEM, and they're about to have a feud possibly next year if I can get the time to put the fingers to the keyboard. Now, to cool down from Isis's experiences with Dracula came Samurai Goddess, and in Samurai Goddess, this is where we are introduced to Misaka, who is the inventor of the fusion cell, and the fusion cell is a major part of a storyline as related to the Cyber Goddess, which is also featured in this story. So Samurai Goddess is an essential story, again, to the Isis character, and it's also an essential story to the whole of the SJS Direct universe. This is one where Isis takes on the manga girls, who are another group of villains who make appearances later on in the SJS Direct universe. So this is the book with the first appearance of Misaka, the inventor, and it's also the first appearance of the manga girls, and it's essential reading for everyone. Now, after that comes Little Girl Lost, which is a fun story where ESTEEM tries to help a little girl who went to see the movie Frozen and got lost in Midtown Manhattan, try to find her way home. And in this story, we run into Brimstone Jack, the demon pimp, and the demon pimp is out to kidnap this girl so he can get a big payday for himself. Now this, if you're an ESTEEM fan, you're definitely going to enjoy Little Girl Lost, which I wish I had the money to put a cover on with Bill Walko at the time, but I couldn't put it on there yet, so I may refresh that soon. But this one is a fun one with a demon pimp, demon strippers, and ESTEEM basically beating the crap out of some demon strippers, and it also further explores how much ESTEEM cares about people and how she's growing as a heroine. So that book and ESTEEM, The Witches of Eastland, closed the second act of ESTEEM's story, and ESTEEM, we're seeing her grow as a heroine, and as ESTEEM grows as a heroine, Isis in House of Isis, which is the next book in the Isis series, is out here taking on a so-called pro-black female who is running a Hotep house, and your Isis is trying to figure out if this woman is a Hotep hustler or if she's out to serve the Heliopolitan faith. Now, after House of Isis comes JOHN HAYNES, A Conversation with Death, and this is the book that basically put JOHN HAYNES on the map after Isis Bride of Dracula cemented his popularity, and The Man Who Rules the World defined him as a character. JOHN HAYNES, A Conversation with Death is the book that I created to be an entry point for anyone as related to JOHN HAYNES' character after the events of The Temptation of JOHN HAYNES, The Man Who Rules the World, and books like Isis, Wrath of the Cyber Goddess. JOHN HAYNES, A Conversation with Death opens up the JOHN HAYNES series and is an entry point for new readers who want to just go out here and learn more about the JOHN HAYNES character. I mean, JOHN HAYNES, A Conversation with Death was the big book for JOHN HAYNES, and again, essential book because a lot of people came on with this book. So that book is essential if you want to learn more about JOHN HAYNES. And after JOHN HAYNES, A Conversation with Death comes Isis Escape from Transylvania. And in Isis Escape from Transylvania, this story deals with all the issues that Isis had with JOHN HAYNES that started in Isis, Wrath of the Cyber Goddess, and Night of the Vampires, and Bride of Dracula, and really we start to see their relationship grow, and we see both characters grow as related to overcoming fears that both of them have had from dealing with issues from previous stories. Now, after Escape from Transylvania comes the turning point for ESTEEM in ESTEEM Ascension. Now, in ESTEEM Ascension, we see the climax of her character transformation arc, and this is a very powerful story because this one wraps up ESTEEM's feud with Delilah, and it also leads to a major change in ESTEEM as related to her powers. So this is an essential story if you've been following the ESTEEM character for years. So this is a major story for the ESTEEM character, ESTEEM Ascension, and a lot of people missed out on this story, but you really have to read the story because it really impacts the future of the ESTEEM character, and it really changes the way she uses her powers. Now, after ESTEEM Ascension, you want to pick up Isis All That Glitters. Now, All That Glitters introduces the character of Goldenshine, who is going to be a major villain in the Isis series, and the Goldenshine story is one that you definitely want to pick up, because this one also goes out here and builds up more character development for Isis and ESTEEM. And this is the second sister team up. I mean, well, not really second, the third sister team up between Isis and ESTEEM. So the first Isis and ESTEEM team up was Amari's Revenge. The second one was My Sister, My Frenemy. And the third was All That Glitters. So this is the third team up between Isis and ESTEEM. So you definitely want to pick that one up. Now the story continues with JOHN HAYNES' Dark Succubus, and JOHN HAYNES' Dark Succubus picks up on the story in JOHN HAYNES: A Conversation with Death. And in this story, JOHN HAYNES is tempted by a sultry succubus, and this further builds the world of demons that has been laid out from all the way back with The Temptation of John Haynes and books like Deadly Delilah and Demons Anonymous. And Selene the Succubus is another demon as part of Lucifer's Legion. Now after this, we get ESTEEM Goddess, of where ESTEEM takes on Avarisk the Tormentor, who is out to try to break ESTEEM's spirit. And this deadly dominatrix takes on ESTEEM as she's vacationing on the island of Solitude and spending some time with her father Osiris and her brothers Horus and Anubis. Now after this comes JOHN HAYNES, The Man with Nothing to Lose, where we pick up on details that were a part of The Man Who Rules the World, where JOHN HAYNES is taking on a bully from his junior high school days, the Block. And this is an action-packed story that really further builds on JOHN HAYNES' past and also shows us how John's strength and resolve have grown and changed, and also deals with a tragedy from his past. So JOHN HAYNES, The Man with Nothing to Lose, is a major story that is a major part of building John's character. And after this comes Isis, the main event, which is one of the start of the turning point for the Isis second story arc. And this is the book where your Isis is a part of a wrestling league, and she's out here teaming up with Nemesis. And this one basically starts to wrap up the Nemesis story arc, but it also is a major turning point for the Isis character as related to her learning more about life and learning more about herself. So Isis, the main event, is where Isis wrestles with her issues as related to herself, but then also has to take on the beast from the bowels, who wants to go out here and beat the crap out of her at the Devastation pay-per-view. So Isis, the main event, is an essential book for the Isis second story arc, and it's a turning point for the second story arc, which builds into the climax of the second story arc. And after your Isis, the main event, comes ESTEEM Blast from the Past, where your ESTEEM is dealing with a time doppelganger, and this further builds up on what I call the Decadia story arc, which starts in the flashback book, ESTEEM The Sands of Time. So in this book, your ESTEEM and JOHN HAYNES are taking on the past ESTEEM, who is one of the deadliest demons in all hell. And it's one where we start to see how John overcomes the demon ESTEEM from the past with the abilities that he has. Now, after this comes JOHN HAYNES Taking Care of Business. And in JOHN HAYNES Taking Care of Business, this is where we get more development of the Lilith Graves character, and we also get a cameo from another character from another novel, Cassandra Lee from A Recipe for Success. So we get that, and we get to learn more about the manga girls who were a part of Samurai Goddess, and we learn more about these mercenaries who are masters of disguise, and we also learn more about another villain, Brent Morrison, who was set to be the CEO of Morris Phillips, yet when John Haynes took over, he scuttled all of his dreams. So there's a lot to learn in the story taking care of business about the business of Morris Phillips, and it also is where John is breaking in his new partner, Lilith Graves, who he had been introduced to in Night of the Vampires. Now, after this comes Cancel Vacation, which was a major story as related to ESTEEM and her growth in Christ. And as ESTEEM starts to grow in Christ, she has to deal with these social justice warriors who are at her favorite coffee spot and the place where she has her Demons Anonymous meetings. And it's in this place that ESTEEM starts to build some resolve as related to her relationship with God, and realizes that following on the road to Christ is a tough road, and sometimes you have to make a sacrifice if you want to follow Christ, and that sacrifice for ESTEEM is her favorite spot, the Java joint. Now, after your Cancel Vacation comes the major event for Isis, which is the climax of the second story arc, Revenge of the Cyber Goddess. Now, Revenge of the Cyber Goddess is the big story where Isis finally has a final confrontation with the Cyber Goddess, and she also has to deal with issues she's had to deal with ever since even before the Isis series began, and before she became a part of the SJS Direct universe, where this is the big story where Isis really confronts many of her issues, and as she's confronting the Cyber Goddess in this major story, it's the turning point for the Isis character as the Isis story with the second story arc comes to its conclusion. Now, as this Cyber Goddess story comes to its conclusion, everything wraps up for the second story arc of the Isis series with Isis Legacy. Now, Isis Legacy pays off the story that was built up ever since Isis, the Wrath of the Cyber Goddess, in the second story arc, where Isis finally meets Colleen from the Thetas, and it closes with your Isis getting a new ally to possibly work with in the future. Now, after Isis Legacy comes ESTEEM Horror of the Hyena Woman, which introduces a villain that was inspired by conversations I had with a Facebook friend. And in Horror of the Hyena Woman, your ESTEEM takes on the newest villain, Salome, who becomes the Hyena Woman from African lore. Now, this one is a major character who's going to be an archenemy for ESTEEM, and I'm hoping to do more with her in the future. Now, after ESTEEM Horror of the Hyena Woman comes John Haynes at Death's Door, and John Haynes at Death's Door is a second story in the Death story arc, and this story is where John Haynes takes on the Greek god of death, Thanatos, and this book is one that was made into a comic for the Kickstarter. So people have the comic for the Kickstarter. They got that book as a comic, but the original story, again, was the second part of the Death story arc, which started in John Haynes, A Conversation with Death, and began the second part of John's character transformation arc as related to the character in the John Haynes series. Now, the books that are coming in 2023 is John Haynes Justified, and John Haynes Justified will be the story where John Haynes takes on the Asgardian thunder god Thor, and we learn more about what makes John Haynes a hero. So that's the chronological order of the SJS Direct Universe books, And with that chronological order, you can follow the timeline for the SJS Direct Universe, see how every character flows and fits into each other and how their stories intertwine with each other. And this is how you can read the books in chronological order if you want to read them that way. Now, if you want to go into the flashback books, which are the ones that take place before the foundation of the SJS Direct Universe, you can pick up the Saga of Master Cassius, Isis Trial of the Goddess, where Isis is introduced in the 19th century, and we learn more about Isis and her father Osiris, Queen Isis, and ESTEEM. That is their first appearance. Then there's the book Isis. Then there's ESTEEM, who's in the politics of hell. And then from there, you can go into Isis Imitation of Life, JOHN HAYNES 1987, which is coming, Isis Death of a Theta, and ESTEEM The Sands of Time. Those are the flashback books, but if you want to read the SJS Direct Universe in its chronological order, you want to start with The Temptation of JOHN HAYNES, and then follow the chronological order I presented in this video. Now, if you want to pick up all of the books on the SJS Direct Universe, you can find all of those books on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. Some of the ones in the ESTEEM series are only available on Kindle, but you can find most of them in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find many of the SJS Direct Universe books on Smashwords, the iBookstore, Google Play, and other online booksellers. And if you want to see me be able to make more SJS Direct Universe books and comics, you can donate to the Patreon, the PayPal, or the Cash App, and I use that money to go out here and pay artists to go out here and design covers and comics, and all of that money goes back into creating more stories. So if you want to help me be able to make more comics and books, your donations would be greatly appreciated. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available in paperback, JOHN HAYNES at Death's Door. The man who rules the world takes on the Greek god of death in this action-packed JOHN HAYNES series adventure. Pick up your copy of JOHN HAYNES at Death's Door at Amazon.com and other online booksellers everywhere.